So Kara Mason is a dentist in New York City, and she lives in Pleasantville. She's been a casual birder, and she describes herself as an intermediate photographer for years, but just focused primarily on birds just in the last 5 years. And her words are, because most birds migrate, they need healthy habitats on both ends of their journey and all stops in between. And this makes them a litmus test for the health of our environment as a whole. And that's certainly Audubon's message too, healthy habitats for birds and people. She says, every time I see a bird, I'm filled with hope for our future. I like that. Photographing birds allows Kara to relive the joy and wonder she felt when she was actually present looking at the bird, and to share those images of hope with an appreciative audience of nature enthusiasts, hopefully like all of you tonight. So Kara, welcome. We're delighted to have you here with us.
Thank you. This past year, I was fortunate enough to travel to some birding hotspots throughout the US. Tonight, I will share 3 of them and hope to inspire you to add them to your next, or maybe first birding vacation. Disclaimer, while most photos are mine, some were taken by my friends to help tell the whole story. A few years ago, I received a stunning holiday card from Audubon's Great Egret Society. Pictured on it were 2 graceful sandhill cranes dancing in the snow. I was mesmerized. Where can I see a sandhill crane? I asked Google. Up popped a few companies who offered photography workshops in Bosque del Apache. I signed up for one of them and headed there last December. So where is Bosque? Located in southern New Mexico, about a 70-mile drive from Albuquerque. Most people stay in Socorro, which is a town located 20 minutes away from the preserve. The refuge itself is comprised of 57,000 acres of grasslands, farms, and wetlands. Bosque del Apache means land of the Apache and pays homage to the Native Americans who lived in the floodplains around the Rio Grande. The refuge was established by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 1939. It's become a crucial stopover for migrating waterfowl. A 12-mile driving loop and walking trails give visitors access to the preserve. Many visitors come in mid-November when the cottonwood trees are turning golden and the cranes are arriving, but December through February are also good months to see the cranes. The refuge grows large fields of corn to attract the cranes and to discourage them from foraging on the neighboring corn farms where they are unwelcome. In the fall, the Fish and Wildlife Service plows and floods some of the fields, creating large shallow ponds, which provide additional food for the cranes. Pictured here, sandhill cranes passing food to each other, a sign of courtship. One of the big highlights at Bosque is the sunrise blast-off. Thousands of snow geese and hundreds of cranes take to the skies from the shallow ponds where they spent the night. The trick is figuring out which ponds they are gathered in and which way they will fly. Hopefully you pick the right location in the large refuge, but it's never a guarantee. The launching is one of the great events in bird watching. Cranes migrate from breeding grounds in Alaska, Canada, and Siberia. They are actually the oldest existing bird species, dating back 2.5 million years. They have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years. Standing at 5 feet tall, they have a 6 to 7 foot wingspan. A profile showing the hole in the sandhill crane beak. It's used for breathing. Air flows in through the nares in the beak, then down the windpipe and into the lungs. I love those bright orange eyes and that deep red crown. Cranes dance with one another, bowing, jumping, running, and wing flapping. They do these dances in courtship, but for other reasons as well, to bond with other cranes, to play, and to reduce aggression between one another. They dance more during mating season, but also this behavior can be seen year-round. I love the 4 snow geese in the lower corner checking them out, and also that little pintail in the lower right-hand corner. Just some more bowing and wing flapping behavior. In addition to the cranes, thousands of migrating snow geese and Ross's geese migrate to Bosque. On the left, an adult intermediate morph snow goose, and on the right, just a couple of them flying with some blackbirds. The Ross's goose is smaller than a snow goose. It has the more rounded head, a shorter neck, and a straighter interface between beak and feathers. It lacks the grin patch or black lips of the snow goose. While driving around the refuge loop in the late afternoons, we would see quite a few northern harriers hunting in the fields. I love the aerial acrobatics this one was doing as he flipped upside down, but never took his eyes off the prize. The refuge is home to other wildlife as well. We were lucky to watch 2 coyotes frolicking in the fields and chasing prey. They put on quite a show for an hour, then laid right down near us. The cranes were unfazed by the coyotes as they ran right past them. Additionally, there are herds of mule deer at Bosque. I was lucky enough to get close to one to photograph this handsome 12-pointer. Actually, maybe 14-pointer, I'm not sure. Javelinas have taken up residence in the past 5 years. These are herbivores, so they are not a threat to ground bird eggs. They are usually found in South America, but with warmer winters, they have moved more north. Javelinas are not related to feral hogs, an invasive species who are wreaking havoc on the environment in the South. The refuge considers them harmless and beneficial. Bosque is home to some waterfowl, taken at sunset, this gorgeous northern pintail being one of them. Here's some beautiful American widgeons. Some other waterfowl at Bosque include American coot, wood duck, redhead duck, and pintail. The widgeons on the lower right are actually mating. A lot of our time was spent watching cranes with their heads bowed, feeding in the fields. On a photography workshop, there is a lot of just waiting around time. However, never be far from your camera and be prepared for the unexpected. Suddenly, out of nowhere, amazing murmurations of blackbirds would appear, swirling around us, touching down, and then changing direction in unison. It was fantastic to be in the fields as these coordinated group flights occurred many times about 50 feet away from us. And while murmurations can often be groups of starlings, a zoom in on the previous image turns out to be thousands of red-winged blackbirds. At the visitor center, there's a desert garden walk with native plants and bird feeders interspersed among the paths. Some of the birds there included the adorable Gambel's quail, lesser goldfinch, and scrub jay. The shy Gambel's quail hide under the brush, then quickly emerge, grab some seeds, and scurry off into the desert. They travel in groups called coveys. Here's a beautiful Pyroloxia. Cranes feed on cultivated seeds and small invertebrate in the wetlands around the cornfields. Drought in the Southwest and high demand for water has led to a shrinking Rio Grande. Therefore, there's less water available to the Fish and Wildlife Service for irrigating the corn crops and flooding the fields to create pond habitat. Smaller flocks have been arriving in Bosque the past few years due to this shrinking habitat and the drought. Because there was less water, the ponds were smaller. The cranes were much closer to us than in previous years, which makes it easier to photograph these graceful creatures. But Bosque desperately needs water to restore their habitat. Here's a picture of a very depleted Rio Grande, not so much a mighty river anymore as human demand on it increases. This is a view of the grasslands, cottonwood trees, and the Chupadera Mountains in the backgrounds as we stood out waiting for the cranes to arrive. At sunset, the cranes arrived back at the ponds to roost for the night. Their silhouettes against the sky make for some cool images. So how to express the magical experience of standing alongside the ponds as the snow geese and cranes return to roost for the night? It's a chilly December afternoon, and the vivid blue sky slowly gives way to a jaw-dropping New Mexican sunset lit up in shades of oranges, pinks, and purples. Overhead and around us, there is a cacophony of trumpeting, bugling cranes and honking geese, numbering in the thousands. Murmurations of blackbirds are still swirling around us. In smaller groups, the cranes begin their descent into the wading pools where they will roost for the night. What an incredible spectacle for me, and truly a birding experience of a lifetime. The second great birding destination is Watacotahatchee Wetlands and the sister preserve, Green Cay. I first discovered Wakatahatchee wetlands about 15 years ago when I was down visiting my parents who lived in Boca Raton, Florida. This is actually my daughter when she was 8 on the boardwalk, sketching the birds she saw. Located in Delray Beach on the east coast of Florida, Waco sits on 50 acres of natural habitat, including open water ponds, emergent marsh, and intermittent tree islands, with shrubs and snags created to foster nesting and roosting. A 3/4-mile boardwalk winds its way through all of this amazing environment. I spent many days at Waco and Green Cay over 2 separate weeks this past year. Each day, the Palm Beach Water Authority pumps 2 million gallons of 90% treated wastewater into Wakatahatchee wetlands. This water, which is free of organic contaminants but still contains excess mineral content, is now naturally purified by the plants and algae in the wetlands, then released into the surface water supply and recycled into usable water. Basically, they are using nature to help recycle and purify water for Palm Beach County. This water reclamation system is brilliant and benefits people and wildlife. Prior to the establishment of Wakatahatchee by the Palm Beach Water Authority, the land was overrun with invasive plants. Using innovative and experimental designs, the Waco Wetland Project created a freshwater marsh with separate pond and land environments, each aimed to cater to certain species. As you walk the boardwalks at Green Cay and Wakatahatchee, you will pass over shallow wetlands, deep lakes, cross land berms, alongside fields of tall sawgrass, and through strands of bald cypress. Sorry, guys, I put 2 slides on top of each other there. One key to Waco's success as a wetland, where so many species arrive to roost each winter, is a series of pond apple tree islands, which provide the perfect environment for dozens of great blue herons, great white egrets, cormorant, anhinga, wood storks, and tricolor herons to raise their young. These islands provide safety from the bird's most common predator, raccoons, which feed on eggs and chicks. The boardwalk runs so close to the pond apple borders that at times you are only feet away from the birds. The trees are chock full of egrets and herons. Pictured here, cattle egret and tricolor heron in breeding plumage. The birds seem to have little or no fear of people. It actually feels like you're in the Galapagos. The boardwalk can get quite crowded on weekends with noisy people out for a stroll, but the birds keep coming back and their numbers are increasing each year. Pictured here, a great blue heron proudly prevents his mate with nesting material. You can actually hear a loud snap as herons and wood storks tear branches off the adjacent bald cypress trees. Even the normally secretive least bitterns could be spotted close to the boardwalk this year. A few of them built nests, which were tucked among the pond apple tree leaves. It's really fun to watch them as they do their tight wire walk across the thin branches. The boardwalk has open slats, and as a photographer, I was often squatting down to get on eye level with a bird, poking my lens through the boardwalk, or precariously standing on the middle rung to grab a shot. By precarious, I mean falling over the rail and into the marshy water below, which wouldn't be so bad except Big George and the other alligators who prowl the preserve. When I took this shot, he was munching on a cormorant, tenderizing it for 15 minutes. Gators have been increasing at Waco as they are prolific reproducers. One of the first birds you will probably encounter in the wetlands is the common gallinule. They usually frequent the shallow marshy areas, feasting on water cabbage and other emergent vegetation. In April, they often have 6 or more chicks swimming alongside them. Blackneck stilts are fan favorites at Waco. We spotted 3 of these delicate-looking shorebirds wading in the shallow waters among the pickerel weed, but only 2 were present the following day. I was so afraid that one had fallen prey, but we found them all, and good news, some juveniles were reported a few weeks later. Standing at 3 to 4 feet tall with a 6-foot wingspan, the incredible wood stork is certainly one of the headliners at Wakatahatchee. This prehistoric-looking species dates back to the Ice Age. The wood storks have moved into Waco in large numbers recently, partly due to habitat loss in the Everglades. close-up of the roosting wood storks. They seem to like be talking to each other and saying cute comments in these pictures. About 100 wood storks roost at Wakota-Hatche. The Everglades has been overrun with invasive snakes endangering their population. They have found a safe haven here. They are large and aggressive, and maybe overrunning things. I actually saw one toss a heron chick out of its nest and drop it into the water below, where a wading croc gulped it up. However, their cute fuzzy fledglings are awkwardly adorable. The storks grab branches from the adjacent cypress trees. During roosting season, photographers can be seen lined up with their long lenses attempting to get the prized bird in flight with cypress branch shot. At Waco and Green Cay, there is a lot of camaraderie between birders, photographers, and casual visitors. Everyone is always oohing and eyeing at the wonderland around them, and people are just happy to be experiencing nature up close on an easy walk. A purple gallinule on the left and the larger gray-fronted swamp hen on the right. The swamp hen is a more recent invasive bird from Asia that seems to have moved in. People often confuse the two birds, but the gallinule is smaller and has the red and yellow on its beak. The purple gallinule also has yellow feet, while the gray-fronted swamp hen has pinkish feet. They both pull up vegetation to eat and keep the wetlands from being overrun. It's really difficult to photograph the iridescent purple gallinule. They hide in the marsh flora and move quickly. Also, it's hard to get their feet showing. I have tried for 3 years to get a decent shot. They are my nemesis bird. But this year I got this image. It's somewhat out of focus, but does show her running across the water with a lily pad, seed pod, which she will use to build her nest. Some days can be quiet at Wakota-Hatche, so we often head over to the sister preserve Green Cay, 5 minutes away. While not quite as established with birds, its 1.5-mile boardwalk is beautiful and peaceful. Just as you begin to think, it's awfully quiet today, a birder will invariably come over and beckon you to see something exciting, like perhaps a Chuck Will's widow. This species of bird belongs to the nightjar family. Camouflaged in the leaves, he was barely discernible and rarely opens his eyes. Back at Waco, as you round a bend, you hear splashing and see movement out of the corner of your eye. An Aninga left or cormorant right has speared a large fish. The show they put on is really exciting to watch. The battle between the wriggling speared fish and the bird is amazing. Often the fish dislodges itself and the bird repeatedly dives underwater to recover it. When the bird is the victor, they will use nearby branches as leverage to dislodge the fish from their beaks, then toss it in the air to reposition it and swallow it whole. I did not take this, my friend Pedro did. Once finished with dinner, the super badass looking Aninga dries off on a branch. Due to a lack of oil on their feathers, they drape their wings over some branches to dry. The Aninga is nicknamed water turkey for its turkey-like tail or snakebird for its snake-like neck as it slithers through the water stalking fish. An Aninga breeding plumage, the eye ring turns bright blue and is quite striking. Many iguana and lizards can be seen cooling off on tree branches or the shady berms in the upland forest areas. On the left, the common basilisk, and on the right, the green iguana. Their numbers have increased dramatically and they are considered invasive. They are herbivores, and are not predators to the birds. Controversy exists on whether or not to cull them. Back at Green Cay, this bobcat had her own idea of how to cull the iguanas as she brought home lunch for her 2 cubs. The bobcats can be pretty elusive, but then suddenly appear right on the berm that runs alongside the boardwalk. The cubs will play in broad daylight and then nap in the nearby thicket. These photos were also taken by Pedro, who spent many days and hours waiting for them to show up. When bobcats don't show up, just look up where the red-shouldered hawks are perched on the large dead tree in the middle of the adjacent pond. They could be seen mating, tearing apart rabbits, and feeding their chicks in the nest. The boardwalk winds right through the strand of cypress trees where they were nesting. all winter. Hiding in the grasses on the far side of the preserve, a stealthy American bittern stands motionless, ready to stalk some fish or dragonfly with its dagger-like bill. Note how the eyes are positioned downwards, giving it a cross-eyed look. Always a thrill to view this bird, if only for a few seconds, as it weaves its way through the reeds and then disperses just as quickly. The Pond Apple Islands are just chock full of birds sitting on nests. Storks nest right next to great egrets and great blues. The majority of breeding and fledging begins in February, continues to the end of May. April sees a lot of action, but more crowds and hotter weather. There were at least 3 nests with great egret chicks on the day I visited in March. This one was 6 feet away from me. Check out the tiny chick in the bottom, who fortunately may not survive due to competition from its older siblings. Here's another nest with just days-old chicks. This tricolor heron was sitting on her eggs. Passing by the nest each day, we peered in and wondered if those eggs would ever hatch. She seemed to share our sentiment. But the much anticipated chicks did indeed hatch to everyone's delight. Wakota and Green Cay have a Facebook group with many people posting spectacular photos. So after you leave, you can still follow the ongoing avian drama at the preserve. The star of the show, the roseate spoonbill, who makes cameo appearances if you're lucky. Gorgeous at a distance, but awkwardly clownish looking up close. Their pink color is largely a result of diet of crustaceans. They usually land far out from the boardwalk and tend to be somewhat elusive, often arriving at sunset. They always create a stir among birders and non-birders alike. And it's always amusing to see people point and exclaim, "Look, there's a pink flamingo." Here's a juvenile spoonbill coming in for a landing. These black-bellied whistling ducks are plentiful. These beauties never quite cooperate for photos, though, as they spend so much time preening and napping. It's hard to get them with their heads up. Some other members of the cast include juvenile black-crowned night heron, palm warbler, glossy ibis, juvenile black-crowned night heron, palm warbler, glossy ibis, palm warbler, white ibis, and green heron in breeding plumage with orange legs, and the Egyptian geese who are hoping the alligator is still asleep. This year, there were 5 juvenile black-crowned night herons. They seem to like the safety of hanging out under the boardwalk right below our feet. This adorable little pied-billed grebe kept us amused with her antics as she bathed and shook herself off repeatedly. Diving under the water, then popping up in a different place, she kept us guessing and on our toes, trying to figure out where she would pop up next. She seemed to take a bow after putting on a show for us. On my last day, I met this lovely family on the boardwalk. As I chatted with the grandma, her son was teaching his kids to identify the birds. They reminded me of visiting Wakota and Green Cay 15 years ago with my parents and my young daughters. Florida is seeing unprecedented growth in population. Suburban sprawl and development are turning once open land into gated communities and strip malls. Farms and open land used to abut these preserves, but now an expensive gated community does. These wetland oases are crucial to birds and wildlife. One can only hope that more of them are created in other towns and that some of the natural environment is left untouched. As an encore to a great 2 weeks, on our way out of Green Cay, a flock of painted buntings were feasting at the feeders. The last destination I was fortunate enough to visit was in Texas. I participated in another photography workshop. This one required no lugging around heavy cameras or standing freezing in cold, windy conditions or sunny, hot, and humid temperatures. Instead, we sat in blinds, cameras perched on tripods, and waited for the birds to come to us. Bob White on the left and Cardinal on the right. Some ranchers in Texas have let portions of their property revert back to native brush, characterized by mesquite trees, cactus, shrubs, and grassland. They rebrand themselves as bird photography ranches and get a tax write-off while doing so. Photographers pay a decent fee to visit and get one of the coveted seats in the 6-person blinds they have spread around their properties. Our group in one of the blinds. Our guide, Jeff, told us that there were 2 kinds of ranch workshop experiences, and it was our choice to decide which one we wanted. We could talk to each other in the blinds and have more fun, or we could be quiet so more birds would show up. So I became the shusher, also known as the noise police. I did not always win friends this way, but we all came home with more keeper images. The first of 6 blinds we were at was the raptor blind, and we mostly saw turkey vultures and caracaras. The crested caracara is sometimes called the Mexican eagle. It behaves like a vulture, but is technically a large falcon. Additionally, we share the same first name, Cara. The head back pose is the money shot. When disturbed, they lift their beaks to the sky and make a rattling sound similar to a stick along a fence. Pieces of raw chicken were placed in the field so the circling raptors would land near us. While some might consider this baiting, these birds are scavengers and would normally be eating roadkill on highways. On the ranches, at least, they are not in danger of being hit by cars. Sorry for so many shots, but I just love the caracara. There are 6 different blinds in the ranch. Some will attract different birds or have varied environmental elements. Perches are arranged and changed often to offer different backdrops. Here's a summer tanager. One of my absolute favorite birds, a long-billed thrasher, and probably one of my favorite photographs that I took. Another long-billed thrasher. As I said, I absolutely love this bird. The wildflowers were arranged on the perch by our naturalist, Ruth. She puts nuts or suet to bring in the birds. They say the resident Texas cardinals are redder than our northern cardinals. Some people from California had never seen one before. I'm not sure they're actually redder. Our guide told us that, I said that right. Here's some painted buntings, little one taking a bath over there. And one flight shot coming off a branch. Here's a female painted bunting. A strikingly handsome Texas tortoise. They are an endangered species due to habitat loss, roadkill, and illegal collection for the pet trade, which is mostly stopped. They can only survive within 1 block of their home. If moved farther away, they will likely die. Texas is doing a good job, though, of trying to protect these species. Gorgeous adult breeding male, blue grosbeak, gave us front and back poses showing off chestnut wing bars. Looks like prom shots. Blue grosbeak, again, one of my favorite shots also. We were lucky enough to get to see baby barn owls in a nesting box on the ranch. This was very cool. A bronze cowbird doing a courtship display for a female on the ground. The adorably and aptly named olive sparrow is the only sparrow with an olive back. This road runner was probably sneaking away from Wile E. Coyote. Here's more road runner shots showing it ruddering its long tail. Note the blue and red facial skin on the breeding male. They can actually kill a rattlesnake. I'm ready for my close-up. Bullock's oriole, note the black line through the eye and the white wing patch. Another Bullock's oriole. The green jay is a tropical jay. Their range barely stretches to South Texas, but these birds were just gorgeous. Great kiskadee with a tiny fish. And a golden-fronted woodpecker showing its white rump. They will hybridize with red-bellied woodpeckers at their northern limits of their range. And my last slide depicting the golden-fronted woodpecker, showing its golden belly on the left, and on the right, his beautiful red head and yellow-orange nape. It's been a pleasure sharing my trips with you. I hope you get to visit one or more of these beautiful places. Happy to answer any questions you may have about planning.